All right, everyone. I think if everyone could just take their seats and quiet down, we're going to get started soon. And Suhail, are we live on? Okay, perfect. So, all right. So let's go ahead and call this meeting. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is 2:02. Good afternoon, everyone. At this time, we'll call to order the February 20th, 2025 regular board meeting of the North County Transit District. Before we begin, members of the public who may be viewing the meeting on the district's YouTube page, please note that in order to make a public comment during the meeting, you must connect to the meeting using the Zoom link provided on the agenda. In addition, you must also register by sending an email containing your name or phone number and the agenda item on which you wish to speak to clerk@nctd.org. Before I ask Suhail Rodriguez, clerk of our board, to call the roll, please mark your attendance by pressing the attend button on the voting device in front of you. And then we're also going to go ahead and do a verbal roll call. So with that, let's go ahead and press those buttons, and then we'll move on to a verbal roll call.
Okay. Board Chair Bat Patel.
Here.
Vice Chair Sinella.
Here.
Board Member Martinez.
Here.
Board Member O'Hara.
Here.
Board Member Garcia.
Here.
Board Member Joyce.
Present.
Board Member Desmond. Board Member Edson.
Present.
Board Member Contreras.
Present.
Board Member Kent Lee. This completes the roll with Board Member Desmond and Lee absent.
Thank you. And Board Member Martinez, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? All right, and at this time, Suhail will now provide a safety brief and review evacuation procedures.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In case of an emergency, I will dial 911. In case of an evacuation, please take the stairs. Do not use the elevators. Once clear to the building, do not re-enter unless cleared to do so by emergency personnel. There are fire extinguishers and first aid kits on each floor of the building. There is also a portable defibrillator on the first floor and staff on hand trained on CPR procedures if needed. This concludes my safety brief.
Thank you. And may I ask you if there are any changes to the agenda at this time?
No, Madam Chair.
All right. Moving on to public communications. Do we have any general public comments today?
Yes, Madam Chair, there are two speakers here in person today to speak on general public comment. I can call the first speaker, Allison St. John Ingus. Ms. Ingus, you have 3 minutes.
So, hi, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. I'm Alison St. John, an Oceanside resident of more than 20 years. And first I'm going to be talking a little bit about the development next to the transit center, which is not on the agenda. So first I wanted to applaud the board for planning this housing development next to the transit station, which appears to be exactly the right location for more dense housing because it gets people off the road so they don't rely on cars and helps reduce carbon emissions. But I understand that natural gas is part of the energy source for the new housing development. And this I see as being really a missed opportunity to use your power and influence to reduce carbon emissions by requiring the developer to use electricity from sustainable sources and not natural gas in the new development. When I read the City of Oceanside's general plan update, which includes the climate action plan update, it's clear that reducing the use of natural gas is one of the few strategies that could make the biggest impact on reducing climate emissions beyond what the state is already doing. There's a graph on in the climate action plan, it's on page ES6 if you're interested, which includes the climate, which makes it clear that reducing, that after 2030, our strategies that we have to reduce carbon emissions will not be enough to meet the targets. So surely it's more economical to require new developments to be built using electricity and not natural gas, rather than being forced to retrofit all those buildings later when it becomes obvious that we have to move in that direction. The quality of life in this region may be affected by the changing climate more than any other factor, so I urge you to consider requiring that developments in the future be powered by electricity from sustainable sources and not natural gas. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll call the next speaker, Ms. Diane Nygaard. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair and board members. I'm here today representing the Sierra Club Oceanside Climate Action Team. In November, several of us were here to express concerns about the Oceanside Transit Center project, and I'm happy to report that a number of improvements have been made to the project, and it's clearly moving the right direction. But we still have a couple, including the fact that those 400 gas-burning fireplaces are no longer part of the project. But we still do have a couple of concerns. As Allison mentioned, gas, water heaters, will continue to use fossil fuel energy source for that project. For the life of the project, in this area served by CEA, will be 100% renewable energy for all electric energy by 2035, yet this project will still be using fossil fuels for decades beyond that. The other concern is really the Transportation Demand Management Plan. This is really an opportunity to raise the bar for transit-oriented development. As a transit agency, as the leader of this project, you really have the opportunity to raise the bar. Instead, what we see is the minimum that's required by the City of Oceanside, who's processing your CEQA documents. And I must say, the City of Oceanside standards are not very high. It doesn't address all of the land uses on that site. So all of the trips generated by the residential units are not covered by a TDM plan. And it doesn't even take place until after 75% occupancy. It really, to be effective, when those uses start, people have to be aware of what the alternatives are to driving a vehicle and get in the right habits from the beginning. And as far as we can tell, the requirements for North County Transit District employees really didn't add anything beyond what you're already doing. And what you're already doing is better than what many people do, many businesses do. But we really want to see you be a leader and step up and do more. Make sure that this really is an example that this whole region can be proud of. We reduce our greenhouse gases and reduce those vehicle trips, and we get more people using public transit. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further public speakers.
Great, thank you. And before we proceed, I have a quick couple of quick protocol items to share. I will ask board members to please hold your comments and questions until after each agenda item has been presented. And then when the time comes for board member questions or comments, if you could please raise your hand and wait until you're called upon to speak. Please turn on and speak into your microphone when it is your turn to speak. This will ensure that your comments are heard from those listening to the meeting online. And when it is time to vote, please use the device in front of you, and you may follow the instructions on the card in front of you in case you need them. So with that, we'll move on to the minutes. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for the regular board meeting on January 23rd, 2025?
Motion by Edson.
Okay, motion by Edson.
Second Contreras.
Okay, second by Contreras. And so with that, let's go ahead and vote.
Okay, on the motion of Board Member Edson, seconded by Board Member Contreras to approve the minutes for the regular board meeting on January 23rd, 2025, Garcia abstains. Motion passes.
And we missed you.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we'll move on to our consent items. There are 4 items on the consent agenda for action today. Do we have any members of the public that are registered to speak at this time?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. And do any board members have any items that they'd like to pull from consent?
I
Board
don't know if
Member
I want
Martin.
to pull, but I have a couple of quick questions, if that's okay.
Okay, and I'm looking at Board Member O'Hara as well. Do you have something that you'd like to pull or just comments?
Question, but I don't want to pull anything separate.
Okay, so anyone else? I know Board Member Martinez and Board Member O'Hara just have a couple of things that they'd like to bring up. And procedurally, that's okay?
Yeah.
All right, great, perfect. So we'll go ahead and start with Board Member Martinez.
Just a couple of questions. So on item number 3, agenda item number 3. The Breeze had 133 total preventable accidents, which seemed to be far more than the other transportation modes. And I was just curious as to, was there a trend or anything that can be shared? And then what are the goal of rectifying or improving those?
Yeah, I would say, obviously, at first glance, that is a lot. We do recognize that there's work to be done there. I would say that when we talk about the preventability of accidents, it could be incidents ranging from very small dollar things like a mirror strike in a parking lot to larger accidents that occur in the system. The team, as we work through the bus transition, is specifically between our safety department, our operations teams are really categorizing and sort of listing where these things are occurring, because they usually have common themes, like when there's a time change, if it gets darker sooner, there tends to be accidents in the mornings, same type of thing. Is there construction in that area? Are we actively notifying operators at the organization that that's happening? It's a little bit more complicated for us to do that in real time right now because they're not our employees. They work for MV Transit, but that's part of the transition piece. I would note that it is always going to be significantly higher than the other two modes, just simply because the rail is in a fixed space. We have 10 times plus the amount of vehicles on the street at any time in bus operations that we do on the rail side. So there's always going to be that uptick, but it's definitely something we're looking at, and we're hoping that as it comes back in-house, we're better able to manage the information that the employees get from our planning department on where we see construction incidents occurring. Does that move up the street? How does that impact stops and how we manage traffic in general? Are we in a safe operating environment when there's a pop-up construction incident? So if somebody's doing water work one day and we don't know about it, who's notifying dispatch, and how do we reroute those vehicles? So a lot of information going into that.
Thank you.
Was that it, Board Member Martinez, or do you have any other? Okay, great. Board Member O'Hara?
So it's just in regards to agenda item number 4, approve the purchase of 6 coaster connection cutaway shuttles from AZ Buses Sales, Inc. This looks like an action, and I'm asking because this looks like it happened before I joined the board. I want to get a full understanding of it. This is an action, looks like it was voted on by the previous board to replace a fleet of vehicles to be reused, or to replace them because of their mileage, according to this from AZ Bus Sales. Just a quick question, and really because the price tag is $1.6 million, just want to know what's happening with the old buses? Where are they going? Are we or what are we getting back out of that? Does that include intact, and where, in what fund does this come from? Just because this seems to be the shortest item on the agenda today, and I just wanted to get a couple of questions.
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple of different ways that we purchase vehicles. I will say specific to the coaster connection, because we were on a little bit of a time crunch on that one, essentially that service was managed by MTS. MTS pulled out of that, and we took the service over instead of paying MTS to run it. MTS was kind enough to sell us 6 vehicles for, I think, $10 a piece. They were hot garbage. But I think our maintenance team did a fantastic job of making sure they were roadworthy for the time that we had while we were looking to figure out what vehicles we wanted to purchase. Part of the reason there was a little bit of a delay is in the bus manufacturing world, cutaways have really been very difficult to get a hold of. In fact, during COVID, a lot of agencies switched to vans, which were not super helpful from an ADA perspective. There's less people that you can put into a vehicle at the same time, more operators that were needed, more vehicles that were needed. All of the chassis that were being built were being pigeonholed for first responder vehicles first, which they should have, ambulances. So we're starting to see a little bit of a resurgence in the cutaway market. So we're at a space where we really feel like we can get those 6 pretty quick and bring them in. The conversation we have in real time fleet-wise is it better for us to buy an extended van and use that has a lift on the back or a side door lift versus a cutaway? In this case, the cutaways are needed because it's a little bit of a hybrid fixed route and dial-a-ride service, so it's kind of fits both needs. When we sell the vehicles, we typically put those on Gov Deals, and people bid on them. Depending on if they have any federal interest or not, there may be money that we owe back to the FTA if it was funded through federal dollars. But there's a threshold for that. Anything under that threshold just goes into the general fund. The money that we're using, excuse me, the money that we're using to buy these vehicles is, because of the low dollar on them, is a combination of grant money and local money. That's actually probably the cheapest we've seen cutaways in a little while. They used to be right around 100,000 a piece and ballooned at one point up to almost 400K. So to see them back in that 200,000 range is refreshing. One thing we struggle with sort of globally, there used to be about 6 or 7 different bus providers on the big bus side. Right now there's 2. On the cutaway side, people have actually gotten away from doing it almost completely. What we're really having to do is buy a body-on chassis and then do a fair amount of modification here at the facility from our maintenance teams. And that's been very successful for us. So we get the bus, we'll do the majority of the work that's needed to put it in place. Oh, did you want to touch on that, or did I? Sorry about that, I didn't see you come up there.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation, thoroughness of it, and catching me up on that. I yield. Great.
All right. It sounds like we don't have any other questions, so may I have a motion to approve consent items 1 through 4?
Moved by Contreras.
Second by O'Hara.
Great. Moved by Contreras, seconded by O'Hara. Let's go ahead and vote.
On the motion of Board Member Contreras, seconded by Board Member O'Hara to approve the consent items 1 through 4, motion passes.
Great, thank you. The next item on the agenda is other business, and it's related to the discretionary grant strategy for calendar year 2025. Mary Dover, Chief of Staff, will present this item, so we'll go ahead and pass it off to Mary.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. So just by way of background, every year the NCTD board gets the chance to approve the discretionary grant strategy for the upcoming calendar year. We, through the course of the years, have gone back and forth between fiscal year and calendar year, and based off of the frequency of when the federal government and the state government put out their notices of funding opportunity, we decided on calendar year. It usually comes out in the beginning of the year. The federal government passes their theoretically, their funding bill in September, and so that gives us a little bit of time for them to prepare and for us to prepare for the upcoming year's priorities. We delayed the calendar year 2025 discretionary grant strategy because of the change in federal administration. We wanted to see what the incoming administration was going to do with some of the federal programs. So now we're bringing it to you this month. We still have a little bit of uncertainty on the federal side, but we can give you a picture of what NCTD's priorities are, the staff's recommendation for what funding we should be seeking for each of our priority projects. So last year, we had some great success getting funding for some of our priority projects that were included in the calendar year 2024 discretionary grant strategy, a total of 103.8 million. This is just what NCTD itself secured. We partner with Sandag and other entities to bring in a larger amount of investment for the region that benefits NCTD's services as well. We were able to fully fund the San Diego Double Track Phase 2 project, which is really exciting, and we've moved the needle on some of our other priority projects as well. So the major priority projects in NCTD's calendar year 2025 discretionary grant strategy are replacement of the Sprinter fleet and all of the associated infrastructure improvements that go along with that, the Sprinter Corridor Service Improvement Project, which I'll talk a little bit more about, the Eastbrook to Shell Double Track Project in the city of Oceanside, and the Sorrento to Miramar Double Track Phase 2 project in the city of San Diego. All told, this represents about $1.3 billion in investment for the district. The Sprinter Fleet Replacement Project, as we've talked about, the Sprinter fleet is one of a kind, and that poses some maintenance challenges that our teams have. We currently have 12 Sprinter vehicles, and we're only able to run 5 because we have some maintenance concerns on that. So there is a grave need for us to replace that fleet as soon as possible. So we've put this at the top of our priority list, and it's going to really be the district's effort to seek funding to replace the Sprinter. With that, because the Sprinter is a one-of-a-kind vehicle, when we get a new vehicle, most of the specifications of most of our facilities are going to have to change. The Sprinter operations facility, as well as all the platforms on the Sprinter, will have to change. Another thing that we're considering is Right now, the Sprinter is operated under a Federal Railroad Administration waiver for crashworthiness. When we replace it with a new vehicle, it'll be fully FRA compliant, we expect. We haven't determined a specific vehicle yet, but that's what we're going to be aiming for. With that, we'll be able to, and most likely required to, implement positive train control technology on that line as well. We are in the very early stages of this project, and so the cost estimates that we've associated with this effort are just that, they're estimates. We expect as we go through some level of design on some of the infrastructure improvements, and as we go toward a path where we can kind of figure out what actual vehicle we'll be procuring, we'll be able to refine some of those cost estimates. Potential sources for this are the federal BUILD program. That program covers a lot of multimodal projects. The Sprinter, because it's platform improvements and because it's fleet replacement, there can be pedestrian, there can be even vehicular improvements that are associated with this, so we think it'll be a good fit for that. Another potential source is the California Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program. Historically, we've had great success on the Losan corridor, and we're in conversations with the state about the applicability of the Sprinter for this program. So the Sprinter Corridor Service Improvement Project, we've been working on this project for a couple years now. It's been in the discretionary grant strategy for at least the last couple of years. It includes two major phases. The first phase is the modernization of all of the signals on the Sprinter Corridor, and that really allows traffic in the surrounding areas to be a little bit more streamlined when we have the gates and the signals talking to each other and the trains a little bit better. The current signal technology on the Sprinter is obsolete, still works, but we do have some challenges with that. It also includes 9.5 miles of double tracking on the corridor. Double tracking is necessary for NCTD to, in the future, double its Sprinter frequencies and go from 30 minutes to 15 minutes. We have a lot of single track bottlenecks, and that prevents us from running additional Sprinter service. I will say that it will allow NCTD to increase Sprinter frequencies, but we do have the operating cost delta that we're going to have to get over the hump with once we double track the corridor. We did secure funding for this project in the past. Most recently, we got a 2024 RAISE grant. RAISE is now billed for $10.2 million to advance the preliminary engineering and environmental clearance of the double tracking portion. We also have some funding for the signal modernization. We're kind of starting in Oceanside and going inland. The Eastbrook to Shell double track project is in the city of Oceanside. It's actually north of the Oceanside Transit Center, so Coaster Revenue Service doesn't operate on this bridge. However, Amtrak service does, BNSF Freight Service does, and it is part of the line that NCTD owns, so it's our responsibility to make sure that it's a well-maintained bridge. So this includes replacement of the San Luis Rey River Bridge with a double track bridge and an additional 0.6 miles of new double track. For the same reasons that I mentioned on the Sprinter, double tracking on the Losan corridor unlocks just additional frequencies that Amtrak, Metrolink, and BNSF Freight can utilize. We do, in partnership with Sandag, we've secured $54.2 million already in funding for this project. We have about $80 million left that we need to secure. Similar funding sources for this, the TRCP project, but we also have a couple of those big FRA intercity rail programs that we're able to utilize, the Fed State Partnership Program and the CRISI program, namely. The TCEP, the Trade Corridor Enhancement Program, that is a state program that's specifically looking for projects that increase freight capacity. So this checks that box as well. And the last major priority project is the Sorrento to Miramar Double Track Phase 2 project. Right now, Coaster, Amtrak, and BNSF services have to slow down significantly through this loop. So what we would do with this project is reinforce the slope. There'll be some grading, drainage, and fencing improvements as well so that we're able to increase the speeds. There's double tracking for the same reasons. We'll be able to unlock that extra capacity. Similar funding programs as the others, TCEP, TRCP, and then those intercity rail FRA programs that I mentioned. So aside from the major priority projects, we also want to include projects that we're going to work to advance. These are projects that aren't necessarily shovel-ready, or we're just doing planning studies on. So the CP Songs Double Track project is another one that's north of the Coaster Corridor, but it's a critical project on Camp Pendleton, right south of the Orange County, San Diego County border, that'll be able to unlock specifically for Amtrak and Metrolink. This will be a necessary improvement for them to unlock improvements and frequency increases to prepare for the Olympics. The Buena Creek grade separation project is also a priority for us. We have an executed MOU with the County of San Diego. to look at jointly funding opportunities in that area. The $300,000 is just for the planning efforts. We're really just trying to figure out what opportunity there is for grade separation in that area. The county is interested in looking at housing and other things in the area, traffic mitigation, et cetera. We do have other grade separation projects that we are tracking, and if any city is interested in advancing their grade separation priority project with us, we know that grade separation is wanted all over the region, so we're open to executing additional MOUs to have a similar agreement that we have at the county to jointly look at those funding efforts to advance those projects as well. So today, the recommendation before you is to approve and authorize staff to implement the proposed calendar year 2025 discretionary grant strategy. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you for the presentation, Mary. I'm going to look to Sahil to see if we have any public comments.
No, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. Are there any board member questions or comments regarding this agenda item? Board Member Contreras.
Thank you so much. So just a quick question on the grade separation. Does the city of Vista have this type of MOU, or when we're looking, because I know we're doing a study at Vista Transit?
We do, and that was actually an application that was put forth by the city that NCTD is working with the city on. We worked with them. It was an FTA program. They're not an FTA recipient, so instead of establishing a cumbersome sub-recipient relationship, NCTD is doing the work in partnership with the city. So I don't know that it's actually officially memorialized in an MOU, but we are working with the cities, and we will work with any other city that has their priorities that they would like us to work on as well.
Okay, yeah, and I'll just communicate offline to see what we can do to formalize the MOU process, whether I need to bring that to my council or not. I'm super excited about the Buena Creek possibility of grade separation there. Actually, remember going down to County Board of Supervisors and advocating to Supervisor Desmond, since this is the only sprinter station within the purview of the county itself. I think it's really critical for the county to take that leadership role there. And there's the potential for a lot more TOD there, and some much needed enhancements for pedestrian and cyclists, safety and mobility there. Outside of that, yeah, I mean, this looks great. Thank you for putting so much work into figuring out the differences and between the previous administration and where we're at now, and how we could position NCTD to continue on its mission. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other board member questions or comments? Board Member Joyce?
Thank you for the presentation. I'm really excited about everything Sprinter, anything that says Sprinter on it, I'm just thrilled. So it's really great to see. I'm excited about the work there. You did mention that we have 12, but only 5 running, and I had not heard that before. Can you explain that a little bit more?
I can, unless you'd like to. Yeah, so we, because the Sprinter is a one-of-a-kind vehicle, we're having challenges sourcing some of the parts. So what we've been able to do is utilize existing resources on some of the other vehicles to make sure that we have enough to maintain the service and that we have a spare vehicle in case there is a mechanical vehicle out there.
Yeah, if I can add to that a little bit. To Mary's point, we got a very one-off boutique system that in the 90s was widely used in Europe and now is widely used nowhere. The vehicles themselves are actually very nice on the inside. They run very well. We have some specific issues with traction motors, and just the way that the infrastructure underneath the car was designed on the rail trucks themselves and how the electronic components kind of fit into that. We're supposed to be a 30-year life cycle vehicle. We're at about 15 years, and we've had a Buy America waiver on parts for 5 years. So we won't be able to sustain another 15 years of Sprinter. In fact, one of the conversations we've had internally is the Sprinter corridor to me is the most important rail corridor we have in our network. If we could double track that line and get cars on there that could run 15-minute service, I think it could be one of the single most successful rail lines in the state of California. In addition to that, making these improvements along the line allow us an opportunity as the owner of the railroad to expand our footprint with our freight partners at the BN. But to me, it feeds into the 15 corridor. Whatever future project we have from movement along the 15 corridor standpoint only works if the Sprinter corridor is functional. if we wait too much longer to purchase vehicles, I think our plan was to try to do that by 2035. We've escalated that plan by 5 years. We want to have the vehicles in our possession by 2030, if not 2028. I feel like if we don't do that, we won't have the ability to effectively manage the network. I think our maintenance teams have done a phenomenal job of trying to take pieces, essentially we're robbing Peter to pay Paul all day long over it, Sprinter operations, and they've just done a phenomenal job of that. When I interviewed here and I took a tour over there, the one thing that threw me off is we actually have a Sprinter vehicle that's on blocks, like somebody stole the rims off of it. So that I thought, man, they're really struggling over here and they need some assistance. And Casey, who runs the maintenance department, is absolutely phenomenal. That crew is doing a great job over there, keeping the equipment the best they can on the track. But we really need to escalate our time frame on getting new vehicles in here to really focus our energy on getting rid of the old ones.
So being one of a kind is not a good thing. And so, and I've talked a little bit before about the crossing at college, and I know we all have individual city needs, and we could talk about that obviously offline, but I'm very appreciative of the update, so thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments from any other board members? Okay, I'm not seeing any here, so I'll come back to you, Board Member Contreras.
Yeah, I forgot to just say one thing. If the platform for the Sprinter needs to be changed, we did just have a discussion at PAF regarding potential for gated platforms. Is that something that would be taken into consideration, either to do it all at once or to phase it in?
It is. I think, and I want to give some credit to the team that's sort of working all of these things in the back, because I think a lot of transit agencies try to lump projects like this into one giant project. I think our team's done a really good job of breaking it out. So we're talking about really a couple different things. We're talking about vehicle replacement. We're talking about stability of the Sprinter corridor, the Escondido subdivision itself. And we're talking about improvements to stations, which also include gates. And so the way that we've sort of strategically prioritized them is what things can we do in chunks that help us get to the other chunks, instead of just saying, hey, we need $1 billion. Well, maybe we don't. Maybe what we really need in the beginning is $250 million with some assistance from the state to buy vehicles, so we can start the process of replacing the vehicles while we're making the necessary improvements that we need at the facilities, while we work to a PTC scenario that would include station realignment and possible things. So that if we ever get to a point where we're roadblocked, it doesn't affect the system if we've done other parts of it to get to that place. And I think that's important for a couple reasons. One, it protects the agency and the taxpayers, and it doesn't give the impression that we have this giant project that might inflate later. It gives us the opportunity to sort of bend and move if the condition changes, but still get the vehicles replaced. So it is in there. It's one piece of sort of like a 4 or 5 part sort of story. It's like a part A, B, C, D. And it's in there with the station redesign, but it's not necessarily all lumped into one piece of the program.
Okay. Yeah, and just my final question too is, if we are able to double track and get this positive train control, are we able to run Sprinters later into the day? Because I know we have a separate agreement. So how does that factor into it? Because we have Front Wave Arena, and it would be really great to be able to connect to that into the later part of the day.
Yeah, we're already running temporal separation right now along that line. So we have an agreement with the BNSF that at some point in time in the evening, we stop running Sprinter service. Typically, that's between 9:30 and 10 o'clock. I think our agreement says 9, but the BN has been really good to allow us to run extra service when there's events at Front Wave. The partnership is very strong there. My concern is that we have to move forward with doing those things, because I think we should be running service on that line until 1 a.m.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And then, 15-minute headway during peak, half hour to an hour headway in the later evenings with consistent vehicles. The ability that really grants us is it opens up another freight corridor as well. There's a lot of, I think there are some businesses that could benefit from some potential freight rail out in the Escondido area. even send it some other places along the line. And how we're able to feed that in real time with a double track scenario, I think is huge. So we want to make sure that all of those options are available.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other parting questions or comments? All right, I'm not seeing any. So with that, I'll go ahead and ask for a motion to approve this item.
A motion to approve and authorize staff to implement the proposed item.
Great, thank you.
Second.
All right, motion by O'Hara, seconded by Sinella. Go ahead and vote.
Okay. On the motion of Board Member O'Hara, seconded by Vice Chair Sinella, to approve NCDD's proposed CY25 discretionary grant strategy, motion passes.
Great, thank you. The last item on other business is a public hearing for the proposed elimination of 2 Breeze routes. Katie Persons, Director of Service Planning, will present this item, so I'll go ahead and pass it off to her.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. So today we'll be asking the board to set a public hearing for the proposed elimination of Breeze routes 334 and 444 at next month's board meeting. For a bit of context, our funding-constrained environment requires the district to be intentional with our operational resources. NCTD's service design guidelines is a document that service planning uses as guidance for performance monitoring and adjustments over time. NCTD has identified 2 services that are redundant or underperforming, which is the subject of the proposed service change. NCTD previously applied to SANDAG's Access for All grant program requesting operating funding for NCTD Plus microtransit in Vista and Fallbrook, but was not successful. SANDAG's flexible fleets call for projects will occur later this year, and NCTD will plan to submit another funding request to that program, requesting funding for Fallbrook and Oceanside NCTD Plus deployments, but that program is expected to be fairly competitive. The first route to discuss is Breeze Route 334, which is one of 7 Breeze routes that serve Vista Transit Center. Breeze 334 is a one-way clockwise circulator that provides service in the area immediately surrounding VTC every 30 to 60 minutes. As part of NCTD's microtransit strategy, NCTD had identified Vista as the second zone to launch. On the map here is the draft proposed NCTD Plus microtransit zone overlaid with Breeze 334. As part of this public hearing and public outreach process, we will gather feedback from the public to finalize the zone boundaries and virtual stops. A few destinations of note within the boundary of this draft zone is the North County Courthouse and Vista High School. And while NCTD Plus will be a shared ride experience and demand will fluctuate, in many cases, the NCTD Plus ride could be more direct for previous riders of that Breeze 334, given its current one-way circulator structure. Last fiscal year, Breeze 334 had approximately 33,000 total riders. That amounts to approximately 117 average weekday boardings and average Saturday boardings of 67. As of a few weeks ago, NCTD Plus San Marcos now regularly passes the 100 average weekday boardings threshold. So this type of ridership activity that we see on Breeze 334 is in line with an appropriate level for NCTD Plus microtransit service. The second route to discuss is Breeze Route 444, which is one of 2 Breeze routes that serve Carlsbad-Poinsettia Coaster Station. Breeze 444 provides peak-only weekday service connecting the Poinsettia Station to nearby office parks in Carlsbad, and you'll see that in orange there. In FY24, Breeze 444 had just over 5,000 total riders, or 20 average weekday boardings. Ridership on this route in particular had dropped off significantly after COVID and has failed to recover. In comparing the 2 routes that serve Poinsettia Station, ridership on Breeze 445 is 96% recovered compared to FY19 levels, while Breeze Route 444 is only 54% recovered. As another point of comparison, this table includes the bottom third of routes based on FY24 total ridership. The Breeze routes within the 600 series are what NCTD calls its supplemental service or school tripper service. These routes are open to all riders and provide capacity for peak school-based travel times. And for the most part, those routes operate just a couple of trips a day during the school year, so about 10 months throughout the year. So even with those significantly lower service levels, all supplemental routes outperform the 444. The next lowest performing route of comparable frequency is the 445, which has 3 times as many boardings as the 444. So due to this low utilization, NCTD is proposing to eliminate Route 444. As part of the public outreach, NCTD will have 2 web pages dedicated to the proposed modification, as well as station A-frames and onboard customer alerts. A legal notice was published in English and Spanish newspapers on February 14th, notifying the public of the proposed hearing. NCTD staff will also host pop-up events, 2 at Vista Transit Center and 2 at Carlsbad Poinsettia, to help inform the public of the proposed changes and gather their feedback. For the outreach on Breeze 334 specifically, we'll include a short questionnaire to help inform the NCTD Plus Vista zone and span of service to make sure that it meets riders' needs. And with that, the staff recommendation is to set a public hearing at the March Board of Directors meeting. And I'll pause for questions.
Great, thank you for the presentation. Do we have any public comments on this item?
No, we do not.
All right. Are there any board member questions or comments regarding this agenda item? Board Member Contreras.
Yes, I appreciate being able to review this with you. And it's always kind of sad to see the elimination of routes. But looking at the Breeze 334, it actually is not too far off from what our standards are. Understanding that there is going to be some redundancy with the NCTD pilot program. However, that is simply a pilot program with no guarantee that we will be able to continue that. So I really have a hard time saying that we're gonna remove the 334 and have the same amount of service if we know that that amount of service is just for a short amount of time. And then these folks are not going, the 15,000 or whatever folks are not going to have a service available to them, because it just doesn't seem like, I don't know where the funding would come from to continue the NCTD Plus pilot program. So I have a deep reservation saying that that's going to be, a solution to it, because it very much is going to be going away, most likely. So those are my comments. I'm not sure if I can, support the elimination of the 334.
Thank you, Board Member Contreras. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Board Member O'Hara?
Not as familiar with the route that Contreras was, Council Member Contreras was referring to, but in reference to Breeze 444, just a couple of questions about how we got to the decision on this, as much to understand the process as anything else. Before we eliminate a route, do we look at route design, rerouting the route, changing that up at all? And how extensive is that?
Yeah, we'll look at, we have access to really granular ridership data, so we can see ridership data throughout the day, throughout the seasons, to see how trends are changing over time. We also will look at nearby routes as a form of comparison to see how they're performing. And some of the kind of recommendations within the service design guidelines will either be to alter the timetables, add or modify trips, or do targeted marketing in order to boost ridership on the routes. So as NCTD looks to employ different kind of strategies like that, NCTD will continue to monitor performance of the route. And if we see that low level of performance over an extended period of time over multiple service changes, then we reach the decision of needing to conserve resources or invest them elsewhere in the system.
Again, I heard you did targeted marketing. Did you do polling? This to me is a business route, and as you said, it operates during peak hours. Did we poll the businesses? Did we poll the riders to see if they had any recommendations?
We will certainly be doing that as part of the outreach. In the past, Carlsbad staff has shared with us some surveys regarding employment travel patterns and TDM programs. And there's been an indication of not wanting to use Breeze bus service to access those employers. And so we do look at different information sources from the cities that are provided to us as well.
Okay, and then within our marketing strategy, I guess still, did we look at the opportunity to collaborate? So for instance, collaborate with, I see the flower fields on here, Legoland, maybe adjusting this and addressing whether we could go to the airport. The airport I know has just received new flights from multiple agencies or multiple airlines, and it seems like there may be an opportunity to connect, and then maybe there's a way for them to even possibly pay for it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. One thing that the planning department unfortunately had to do a while back was we had a route that specifically sort of managed, not necessarily tourism, but routes around Legoland and some of those things. We eliminated that route due to low ridership. I think the conversation that we've had related to that area, specific to the airport, is do we think there'll be a resurgence along Palomar Airport Road? There's definitely a possibility for that. I would say the trends don't support that theory. That might be a theory that we have that the trends actually don't support. I think we want to see how, frankly, how the legal issues around commercial flights out of that airport check out before we run into putting routes together. If it is a long-term solution, I do think that's a specific grid where we targeted where we want to find a way to manage some ridership differently. That specific route has created a little bit of, I think just because of conditions post-pandemic, there's just not the ridership base there that we thought would be taking that route up the hill to the businesses.
And just for clarity, we will still maintain Route 445 along Palomar Airport Road, so there is still access in that way. It's just not on the 445, which winds through the office parks in a different way.
Thank you. I appreciate your answering my questions.
Any other questions or comments before I make mine? All right. I'm not seeing any, so I'll go ahead and go ahead with mine. So thanks again for the presentation. And I know I've already discussed this with you all, but just so that the public can also hear from me in terms of, where I'm at with regards to the Breeze 444. I think in the past, we definitely did have folks that utilized, for instance, the Carlsbad connector. So I just want to make sure that as we move forward, that when we do have conversations with, like, for instance, the business park or even with our staff, that we're looking at ways to fill the need. I almost equate it to like the chicken and the egg, because I feel like in some sense we have, obviously we've had this route, but it's also like, okay, what else can we provide in order for folks to be able to have the ability to take other forms of transit? I think I mentioned that during our conversation when we had a briefing that, years ago, the way that North County was planned wasn't planned for like great public transit, right? I mean, I think it was planned in a way where it was very car-centric, and I know that we're doing as an agency our best to fit around how it was planned decades ago. I think one of the things that would have been amazing is if it would have been a little bit more transit friendly, because I think we would have seen a different sense of behavior from our own communities, right? And so from that particular perspective, I just wanted to say that I always look at it from the perspective of if we actually had more availability for folks, I think we'd see a difference in behavior. One of the things that I said, wrote down was, I'm sure there are changes in behavior due to what the pandemic and how the pandemic happened. Obviously, there are changes in terms of the economy and ways that businesses are operating. Folks have remote days. We're not seeing folks going in as much. The industrial complexes are a little bit more empty, so obviously that corridor might be a little bit more empty. But I think there are so many different considerations, and one of the things that, for me, that I'd like to see is how do we fill that gap? And so, yes, I know the numbers are low. I totally get that, and in comparison to others, but I think for a long-term solution for me, I'd like to be able to see how do we fill that need, because maybe ultimately we'll be able to change that behavior to folks wanting to utilize a different mode of getting there. So that's what I just wanted to throw that out there. And again, I know where we're at. I understand that. I do hope that we'll talk to our businesses and our staff just to make sure that we're getting all of that information that we need to make informed decisions as we move forward. And another plug for when you all do decide that we're looking at other cities for maybe NCTD plus, or if it's something else in that particular regard, a plug for Carlsbad, obviously, whenever that comes down the pipeline. So other than that, thank you. And if I'm not seeing any other, oh, all right, Board Member O'Hara.
So I think I want to follow that up. And maybe this is my hesitancy and my reason to have the questions for a route, and I think this builds on your point, is I think, as an organization, we are, whether numbers are up or numbers are down, we're always looking to provide a viable, attractive option for people to go places on, to whether it's in recreation or professionally. And my only concern when we do things like this, this type of decision, is the fewer options we have, the less attractive we are. And how do we make these types of decisions, and at the same time make sure that we're going forward and offering that maximum opportunity, whether it's the Route 334 or the Route 444. And so I always want to make sure in these decisions, I'd like to make sure that as an organization, we are not trying to go forward by pulling our options back, but always making sure that we are exploring the options to expand our opportunities to make ourselves the best option or best choice for people.
Any other board members? I know Mr. Donaghy had something too, but Board Member Joyce, did you have something? Oh, okay, all right.
I think the important piece of the equation, and unfortunately something that I think we've all dealt with if you've worked in transit in any period of time, is one of the things that NCTD, at first glance when I came in the door, struggled with is we have not really done a system overhaul in a decade, maybe a little less than that, pre-pandemic.
2018, 2017.
2018. Those should really be done every 2 or 3 years. And the reality behind that is because we have a very fixed pot of money. And I can tell you that as an agency, we've done everything in our power to keep the service that's out there. To give you an example of tough decisions that we've had to make, is we had a San Marcos pilot. And Sandag opted not to fund any continuation of the pilot. And I've instructed our team here that we don't do pilots anymore, because I don't want to have to put a service out that might be successful over the course of 12 months and then have to pull it because we don't have funding. So when we have conversations about NCTD Plus and Vista, yes, for the term pilot, for us to be able to manage what a pilot looks like, but we would not have moved forward with that if we were not committed to funding that in the future. And part of these moves that we do are to fund places that we see successes. And that requires a little bit of retraction, because the reality of our situation in real time is Transnet funding is down, local sales tax funding is down because the population is decreasing. Unless the agency, which we will need to explore at some point in time, is looking for a new funding source, which was not which was not really the spirit of the last initiative that was out there on the ballot. Very small amount of that money went to operating and maintenance of service. Essentially, 12% of that tax referendum went to operating costs for maintenance and operations of service, and we would have gotten 4% of that 12%. And now we're locked into a sales tax initiative for a long time that potentially caps out local sales tax. As an agency, we need to think long and hard about whether or not we want to couple ourselves with MTS or go it alone without Sandag on our own specific transit tax referendum that funds these types of services so that we can sustain them. The issues that we run into in real time is, yes, we see the success on the 334. The issue with the 334 is it potentially takes ridership away from a successful NCTD plus. One of those two is going to end up getting squashed if we run them both concurrently, because one takes away from the other. And I think in our view, the NCTD plus service provides far more service throughout the city than it does on a singular fixed route line. And if we can maintain the quality of service that exists on the 334 in an NCTD plus sense, we're in a good space. The tough decision, and I totally agree with you, is some of these routes they're not super well performing. The one that I typically give the best example on is the Route 347. It's one of our lower performing routes in the system, but it's probably one of our most important routes because it provides service between Cal State, San Marcos, and Palomar. Okay, so when we look at them, sometimes it's not always just about the number. It's not always just about certain pieces. There's an element of how does it affect neighborhoods? How does it affect businesses? I think some of our hesitancy in relation to the 444 is, we thought we were going to have a fairly good commitment from the local businesses on the coaster connection. And so far, we've had a grand total of nobody step up and help us. But they were more than happy to stand right next to us the day that we did a press release and stood by the train and did all that stuff, and we've received a grand total of $0 from them. And that's the part that we have a little fear on. I think if we were able to get to a space where we could go to those businesses, and I think you touched on that, totally agree, we would love to go to the business and have that conversation in real time and say, if this is really something that your business needs, help us fund that so it's an offset to us so that we can figure out driver pay and some of the maintenance stuff, but the service part, you're helping us cover the fare box recovery or whatever that is. I definitely appreciate all the comments. I will say this is probably one of the tougher things we do is when we sit around and we look at the routes and we say, man, what's the objective here? What are we really trying to accomplish? And I agree with every comment that everybody said here today, that it is a tough decision and it's not easy to try to find one and say, okay, I think that's the one that's got to go. But in our current funding situation, some of these things that we think may be better ridership generators or may be better generators of needed ridership in areas where there's less opportunity for transit are sort of the decisions when we have to move those pieces of the pie around. So not excuses or anything like that, just always like to provide a little perspective on some of the tears we shed behind the scenes that nobody sees. Because I think our planning department, I know they definitely struggle on the personal side of that and the business side of it, right? Like it's a real tough thing to have a conversation about. But I definitely appreciate all the comments. I hear you, and I agree with every single thing that's been said, so.
And if I may just respond really quick to what Mr. Donaghy said, and then I saw some hands go up, so I'll make my way around with regards to the business community, which I know I also mentioned that I'm sure there is an appetite. I am happy and committed to going and chatting with them because I know I've talked to them about it before. So I'm more than happy to go talk to some of those alongside you all because I think it's important for them to realize that there is a way in a partnership in order for this to move forward and a way for us to be able to invest in, the folks that we're employing along the corridor. So I'm more than happy to do that and something that I'm more than willing to, take on. Just let me know when. I saw Board Member Sanella's hand up, so I'll go there. And then I thought I saw one over there. Was it you, Board Member Joyce?
Might have been
Oh,
Jewel.
okay, Board Member Edson. Okay, so I'll go ahead with Board Member Sanella, and then we'll go to Board Member Edson.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, staff, for the presentation. And Sean, especially thank you for that additional insight. I didn't come here planning to speak on this item, but because we are having a healthy dialogue on it, I wanted to just say that it sounds to me that staff's taking the right approach. You've analyzed the data and you're making data-driven decisions. For me, it's not a hard decision. I understand where you're going with that, but as an agency, we should always be looking at ways to make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck for taxpayers and for riders. And in an ideal world, resources would be unlimited. We'd be able to offer everything to everybody. But that's not going to happen. That's not the case, right? That's not reality. And so we would not be doing our jobs if we weren't looking at the routes on a regular basis and having them evolve into other programs like NCTD Plus. I think we're doing exactly what we should be doing. And nothing's permanent. We can take something away and we can bring it back. And so that's how the private sector does things. And I'm encouraged as just somebody who's my second meeting to hear staff present the data the way that you have and taking the approach that you have. So thank you. And I'm supportive of staff's recommendations too.
Board Member Edson, did I see your hand raised?
Yes, my question was about there was something in the report that talked about on May 19th, NCTD plus Vista Microtransit Zone will cover a certain area. But if there are no more pilot programs, are we still going forward with this Vista Microtransit Zone?
Yeah, so let me put a little context around that.
I apologize, but
No, it's a great.
yeah, I get migraines and that thing
Can we
is about to
just
trigger
turn
one.
that thing on? Hey, Jorge, can you unplug that for me? I didn't mean to point you out, but you're like the tallest guy in the building. No, that's a great question, and I think, yeah, just turn around.
Then you guys all get ahead
That
of
way
me.
nobody else
Sorry.
Yeah, then they can get the migraine. For the purposes of our reporting to the Federal Transit Administration, it's important for us when we put out new service to term it a pilot, because it allows us the opportunity to do a couple things, and from a board policy perspective. When we first put out NCTD Plus in San Marcos and I came on board, it was essentially listed as a boutique service. And the fare on it was somewhere around $4 to $5. And we had a great conversation with staff and we said, that can't be a thing. Like, is your goal to make money off your boutique service or is your goal to drive up ridership? And our goal was ridership in San Marcos. So we lowered the fare to be sort of commensurate with all the other fares that are sort of aligned in our system. Being under a pilot project allows us the opportunity to do that. We can change the zone when somebody calls and says, hey, there's a hospital here, or there's this thing. We don't really have to come back to the board and make that change. We can just change the zone. We can change the condition of how the route is run. So that first year of being in a pilot, quote unquote, is important for, I guess, name-only purposes. My instruction to the group, which actually was born out of a conversation that our planning department had concerns over, which is it's tough for us as an agency to talk about pilots and how we want to continue them in the absence of funding. So we do a great job, like San Marcos is a perfect example. We made a lot of adjustments to San Marcos. It's, in my estimation, from having seen the inception of a lot of on-demand service, it's very successful. It does have room to grow. We do have some messaging we have to kick out. But we see that same success getting ready to occur in Vista. And so the conversation we're having internally is if we're going to do that, that has to be a permanent part of our playbook, at least until the point where the data shows us after 3 or 4 years that it has not been a successful endeavor for us. Our long-term goal is if we do a pilot in Vista, there will be NCTD Plus in Vista. And when we do a pilot in Oceanside, there'll be NCTD Plus in Oceanside. And as we move through those sort of segments of that, they will always be there because we have loaded them into our budget and we've made the proper adjustments to the fixed route system to offset some of that cost.
Okay. Now, on Friday, when I was at Sandag, I read that funding for NCTD Plus would not be renewed. It was agenda item 7 under economic and budget outlooks. And have we been having ongoing discussions with Sandag about this issue? Or was this just a surprise that was dropped on us?
I don't think it was, I'll be careful how I say this.
Sorry.
It's a great question. Next question. I was extremely disappointed, but I was not surprised. I find that Sandag has continued to fund other things that are on their agenda that I think are far less productive than NCTD Plus.
Well,
And I think other TNCs have not benefited from that either. I think there are other TNCs in the county that are doing great work, that are partners with NCTD and MTS that didn't get any money either. And I would have rather tried to work with Sandag to find a solution to fund NCTD Plus if the other TNCs would have gotten money. And so I struggle with that. I think there was a way for us to come to a conclusion that worked. And I don't know if we were loaded into that conversation as effectively as we should have been. And I can't say that that's, I don't want to say it's uncommon, but I think occasionally we see things when we get to meetings that we're like, hey, where'd that come from? We don't think we were surprised on this one. I don't think it was a shock that we did not get the continuation of that funding. Now, to be fair to Sandag, they're working with a smaller pool of money. They were very upfront with us that Transnet money was down. Grant money has been slowly trickling in at Sandag. They're experiencing the same thing that we are. So they're going through the same process of what really matters to the region versus what is important to NCTD. So it's not that we don't understand their space. It's just, I think, disappointing for us when we see we have this successful program and we want that to continue and grow throughout the county. And what we're finding is we would have done a combination of both anyway. I think even if we would have gotten the funding from Sandag, we still would have had to review the network to see if there's redundancies where we can move that money to the next NCTD plus pilot, right? Like it's cyclical. So great question. Thank you for that question.
Well, agenda item 7 was 7A, 7B, and 7C. So by the time I dug down into their, they have massive reports. By the time I dug down into it and actually discovered that NCTD Plus was not renewed, they'd gone past that part of the presentation and that discussion. And so I didn't really have an opportunity to ask the question there, and they didn't raise it. No one knew, no one else sitting there at that board knew that that funding was being pulled.
Yeah, the sense that I got was that we didn't have a dog in that fight. So we were.
It was just a comment.
Yeah. And we had sort of pulled ourselves back to the part where, okay, well, let's reevaluate internally how we can keep a good service going, because we had such a great partnership with San Marcos on that. And I see the success that's about to become in Vista. Like, I can't tell you how much I think that's going to be such a huge deal for Vista, right? So we really had to go back to the drawing board and just say, okay, what are we really trying to do with this? And I think the instruction that Katie and I sort of collectively came to was, we can't talk about things that can't be sustained, right? Like we can't talk about pie in the sky opportunities that we have if we don't have the funding to sustain it. We need to be able to say, we're going to run this pilot, and we anticipate that the success of that service will continue for years. Because that's not fair to the ridership, and it's certainly not fair to the cities that we go to and try to get them to buy into these new services, right? Like, we invested a lot of personal capital going to San Marcos, and I got to give former board member Jenkins a lot of credit on that. Like, we were constantly having conversations about how this could change and be successful. We received a lot of feedback in the first 4 to 6 weeks about how to morph the service from everybody. Council was engaged. We had a great kickoff. Like, nothing says, hey, we got to cancel that. Or like, there's no more of a punch to the face than that, right? Like, we were committed to making sure that that thing continued, and committed to making sure that when we got to Vista, we were in the same spot, that we were all the way in the game, and that we're going to do it for years to come. And I think the planning team's really done a good job of managing that. And I appreciate the help from the board too, because that's not something that we're doing by ourselves. I mean, I think anytime we've had a conversation about additional service, the board has done an excellent job of helping us talk about it in their cities and making sure that we're selling what we got.
Well, thank you for that detailed answer to my question. And I have heard nothing but positive comments about the NCTD Plus program in San Marcos. So I hope, however this shakes out, that we're able to figure out a way to make that program and other programs like it work.
Board Member Contreras?
Okay, so just for clarification, the 334, is this elimination? I understand that we're going to have the pilot program. My biggest issue is that there's going to be an end to that pilot program, and these 15,000 or so riders are no longer going to have the circulator that they need. And the fact that it's not listed anywhere as like lowest ridership compared to some of these other things. So is it fair to say that the elimination of the 334 is going to help sustain NCTD Plus? Is that the actual goal? Because I can get behind that, but if you're telling me that we're going to eliminate this just to have a 12-month pilot, and then there's going to be a gap in the service, I can't be behind that.
No, I think to your earlier comment, and I apologize I didn't get a chance to address it. I thought your comment was probably more formed in a question that I should have answered, which is our goal, I don't say goal, but our thought process in the elimination of the 334 is that it will ensure the sustainability of NCTD Plus, not just for a pilot. Because if we run the pilot and the 334,
Right.
it's likely that the
canni-
NCTD Plus
cannibalize.
will not, right?
Yeah.
It's likely that after a year, we will probably land in a space where the NCTD Plus is not. And to give an example in San Marcos, we had a run in San Marcos that came straight out of the Sprinter Station. And when we implemented NCTD Plus, yes, we had service along that space that went to a few businesses along 78. But what we did is we opened up the whole zone. So we saw a lot more ridership sort of collectively all throughout the north end of 78 and even to some extent around North City. The North
Yeah,
City
because
development.
if I'm hearing that, then
Yes.
I'm okay with this.
Yeah, I apologize. That's
Yeah.
on me. I wanted to answer that question for you
Yeah.
and say, yes, that's our commitment. Our goal is,
Because I will be the first one up here if we end NCTD plus and I have, all these riders on the 334 and I'm not seeing that they're able to get to where they need to get to, then I'm going to be over here advocating to my board that we need to bring this route back. But,
so I would.
so just to be clear,
I would, I would answer this a couple different ways.
sure.
Our goal is to have service along that corridor in some form or fashion. If the NCTD Plus proves that maybe we have some opportunities to shift, or maybe NCTD Plus is just not as productive in Vista as it is in San Marcos, then we have to go back and reevaluate what we had previously to reinstate that. So the commitment level is there has to be something there for the passengers. It may not necessarily be on that exact route, but when we see these ridership shifts, like the NCTD Plus is going to give us a good gauge of, especially on a heat map, of where we're picking people up. And what we may find is that the 334 may have been largely more successful if we were 2 blocks north or 2 blocks south or a block west.
Right.
And so if we ever get to a place where we have to switch back, we have tons of data at our disposal to be able to make that decision in real time. To me, it's not a scoop and run, right? Like, not to say there aren't routes that's happened before, but I think our goal is to try to alleviate that pain as much as possible by either route deviations.
I mean, if that's
or-
the commitment that I'm hearing from
Yeah.
you and from the board and from staff, then I'm okay with it. I'll go ahead and move a staff recommendation to set a public hearing for the proposed elimination of breeze routes 334 and 444.
Second?
Okay, and I know Board Member Joyce had some questions and comments as well.
No, I just like real brief comments. So I just appreciate the sussing of it out. I love that. That's a good public meeting right there. And I don't know. I heard some words that always raise flags of like running a service like a business, and I'm not trying to like pick on anybody or call anyone out in any specific way, but I just want to remind my colleagues, like, this is a public service. It's not a business, and we have to take parts of the business world and implement them to make sure that it's sustainable, but in the sense that we run this like a public service, that's the most important thing to me. And I don't know, maybe we need to get together and talk about priorities and long-term visions and that kind of thing as a team so that we're all on the same page in that regard. And the difference is so big because our goal isn't about maximizing profit, but maximizing benefit and service to the people that we serve. And these conversations that we just had are really about service and about what the folks in our cities need out of NCTD. And so I love that we're having those really important conversations and then funneling that all through the lens of what the mission of this agency is. So I appreciate that, and I trust that this serves the long-term goal of the agency, and yeah, I'm fully in support.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, we did have a motion for this item, so a second is the only one that's necessary.
Oh, yeah, we did receive a second from Board Member Edson.
The first motion was Joyce.
Oh, okay, so there we go. We've solved it. There we go.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments? I know there's a motion on the floor, but any other questions or comments? All right, we can go ahead and vote then.
On the motion of Board Member Joyce, seconded by Board Member Contreras, to set the public hearing for the proposed elimination of breeze routes 334 and 444, motion passes.
Great, thank you. And now we'll head on over to the Chief Executive Officer's report. So, Mr. Donaghy, do you have anything to report?
Thank you. Just a couple things, Madam Chair, members of the board. We are at our Coaster 30th anniversary. We don't look a day over 20. We will be hanging out tomorrow at OTC, a little bit of a public event there. The other thing that's coming up this year, which will be on a Saturday later in September, is our 50th anniversary of the agency, so we got a lot going on. At each of your stations, we have our Coaster 30th Challenge coin and also our Coaster 30th lapel pins. So we're pretty excited about that. Team did a great job on it. We just wanted to say thanks to that. One of the things that's really interesting that's happening this month is the city of San Diego is issuing a proclamation to one of our employees, Crystal Trent, who was the first female African-American engineer for trains in San Diego County. So that is a huge, yeah. And I got to tell you, I was very fortunate to meet Crystal before I was even employed here. We were doing some interviews before March and had an opportunity to speak with her when she was an engineer on the train. And she's actually one of our supervisors now. And she is phenomenal, just such a joy to have on our rail operations, super knowledgeable, great personality. She's just a joy to work with, and just super happy for her to be able to get this recognition. And, you know, we're going to have some staff down there, down at the city council to watch that proclamation. So pretty excited for her. Mary Dover and I are going to DC next week. It might be on fire. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see it's cold. I don't want to go there because it's cold, but actually I think this is a good time for us to go. We've had some appointments that affect us. Sean Duffy, who's the head of the Department of Transportation, he's actually in our transportation circles, he's very well known. You know, he's a supporter of transportation projects that make sense and are relevant to cities in the nation. And so I'm anxious to maybe get an opportunity at some point in time, probably not this trip, but to sit down and have a conversation with him. I've actually talked to him before in a previous role when he was an elected official. And I think he will continue moving things forward at DOT. A new FTA head as well. I don't think we're going to be able to speak to anybody from FTA while we're there, but you know, sort of the goal is to get in there and talk to the appropriations teams as we get close to reauthorization and just say, what can we help with? What's the changes? What's the lay of the land? How can we be helpful to the appropriations teams? You know, we meet with the House and the Senate. We meet with all sides of the aisle. As it relates to the bus coalition specifically, we have several members of the bus caucus that are on both sides of the aisle, and it's really a good conversation with all of them. It's typically revolving around infrastructure, how specifically we can help support rural agencies. So there's a lot of really good conversation that comes out of that, and I always walk away thankful for both sides that are on that delegation. So if you have anything for us that you want us to take with us, we're more than happy to do that. Just shoot me an email, because we always like to plug local projects too when we're there, especially if we're talking to elected officials. We love to make sure that they know what's going on in our home district. And so if you got anything for us to take, we can do that. A few weeks ago, we had the first rodeo in a long time, bus rodeo. Big thanks to Lida and the Marcom team and Lilia and the operations and maintenance teams. Are they still here? I know Lilia's here. Is Lida here? Where's she at? She leave? Lilia, do you want to stand up for a second? Just be recognized. So Lilia and the operations team did a great job. We had, how many contestants did we have from our? We had 3 Yeah, and it was a great event. You know, shout out to MTS and our friends over there. We're kind of taking turns who's going to host that rodeo. So next year it'll be well, actually October, right? October it'll be at our place down at West Yard in Mission. We're pretty excited about that. If you've never been to one, it's essentially a showcase. The operators do a road course, show off their skills, and the mechanic teams have to go and diagnose buses and kind of the things they do in their regular job, but they're on the clock. And you know, the top 2 teams, the operator that won and the maintenance team that won, we're going to send them to the national rodeo in April. So we're pretty excited to have I think that's the first time in over a decade, maybe longer, that we've had a team at the national. So we're really excited about that. If you've never been to one, come down and check it out. Next year, if you show up, we'll let you drive a bus through the obstacle course. It's not easy to do. So when's the regional rodeo? That's in Riverside? Yeah, Riverside and Hammett. Cool. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. And that's all I have for today, unless anybody has any questions for me. I'm more than happy to dodge your questions.
Well, thank you for that update. Any board member comments? Board member Edson?
So I'm sure you've seen things on the news about the Sandag Values Analysis Study and new alternatives and things like that. So I just wanted to take a moment, since I do sit on the board of Sandag, and my city, as well as Board Member Martinez's city, have received presentations from Sandag in the last week on this item. So over the last couple of weeks, Sandag has released information about the Lausanne Rail Realignment Values Analysis Study, as well as updated alternative routes. I understand Sandag staff will bring to their board on February 28th. For the benefit of those new to the board or the topic, in June of 2024, Sandag released a notice of preparation, or NOP, of the draft EIR for the project. Ahead of the NOP's release, stakeholder engagement had been pretty narrowly focused. So the NOP ended up generating more than 1,500 comments. And in response to public comments and following the direction of their board, Sandag launched a values analysis, a collaborative, technically driven process to study ways to improve the three alternatives that were offered in the NOP and to identify additional alternatives for consideration. So from September through December, a series of VA study meetings were held with an expanded group of stakeholders. Participants included Director Martinez and myself, but also representatives from the cities of San Diego, 2 from Del Mar, 2 from Solana Beach, 2 from Encinitas, and 2 from Carlsbad, along with NCTD, Caltrans, and the fairgrounds. Also participating were various subject matter experts with expertise in tunneling, hydrology, geology, et cetera. And each city's engineers and community development directors, city managers, and of course Sandag staff, who kind of led the thing. Both Director Martinez, as I said, and I participated, as did a number of NCTD staff members. During the study, participants focused on refining and restating the project objectives. Stakeholder feedback on the positive and negative attributes of each of the original 3 alternatives, A, B, and C, was collected, and the group brainstormed hundreds of new ideas and possible modifications. I wish that I could report that an alternative with 0 impacts to anyone or anything emerged from the process, but this wasn't the case. However, Sandag has reported that at the end of the study, there was a general consensus that the potential alternatives should minimize impacts to private property, very important to both of our cities, minimize disruptions to local businesses and economic enterprises, and demonstrate responsible public stewardship by minimizing conflicts with prior and ongoing infrastructure investments. And one example noted in the study is the $254 million fully funded San Diego Lagoon Rail Bridge replacement and double track project. So after reviewing many ideas generated in the 269-page VA study, something I call my lost weekend, as well as those included in prior studies, early last week, Sandag recommended 4 alternatives plus a no build, which is a requirement of CEQA. And on February 28th, these alternatives will be presented to the Sandag board. At that time, the board will be asked to select alignments that should be advanced for environmental review. The first 3, yellow, blue, and pink, are modified versions of the NOP alternatives A, B, and C that were the originals. Sandag staff released a draft preliminary map of the proposed alternatives and also released updated estimated costs. I mentioned the San Diego bridge replacement earlier for 2 reasons. It's important for us here at NCTD. First, for those of you new to the board, the upcoming replacement of this 108-year-old single-track wood trellis bridge, which has been sitting in tidal waters for well over 108 years, has been a top priority of NCTD, Lausanne, and Sandag for more than a decade. Replacement of this vital bridge is essential. And second, as a result of the study, newer modified alternatives are all located south of the rail bridge, which avoids the loss of hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer-funded corridor investments. So to date, Sandag staff has presented informational updates about the study and the recommended routes to the 22nd DAA Fair Board, which we both attended as well, and to Solana Beach and to Del Mar. And I believe that they're presenting to the Torrey Pines Community Planning Board today. Is that correct? Yeah. So if you have any interest in the presentation, it should be viewable online. I know my city post says it's yours. And more details are available on the project website. So that's it. The map, I brought copies of, so you can see what was in the news all over the place.
Thank you, Board Member Edson. Anyone else before I have my comments? Not seeing any. Okay. Just thank you to everyone and to staff for all the work that's being put in. I know you all are working day in and day out, so just a huge thank you. We see it out in the community and, of course, here at our board meetings. I also want to ask my fellow board members, just as we're out representing the agency, whatever we can do to advocate for our constituencies, I just want to put that plug out there. I know you all are out there doing that. But it sounds like even, when Board Member Edson brought up with regards to Sandag and NCTD Plus for San Marcos, I think it's so important for us as elected officials to do what our job is and to advocate not only for our communities, but when we're sitting here to advocate for North County. So I just want to throw that out there as your chair. And the other thing is, as your chair, I will be sending a note. I think I've already sent it out to Mary. She'll be sending it to all of you. I'd love to be able to, sit down with you, hear from you with regards to what some of your priorities are for each of your cities. And I know at the same time, I think as an agency, I'm sure we'll be doing some form of a retreat just so that we can all talk about strategic planning, as was mentioned earlier, but also just talking about priorities and policies, et cetera. So that I know that the leadership team here will be handling. But other than that, just continue to let me know if there's anything else that you all want to see. And if there's anything that I can do to help you all, just feel free to reach out. You'll get all my information. Just wanted to mention that. With that, I just want to say thank you. And the next scheduled meeting is our regular board meeting, March 20th, 2025 at 2 p.m. Our Marketing, Service Planning, and Business Development Committee meeting at March 24th, 2025 at 10 a.m. And with that, we are adjourned at 3:27. Thank you.
Thank you.